Hello everyone, this is Professor Chan from Math 1240 speaking. I'm going to go over the very last section for Chapter 9, which is hypothesis testing. Yeah, this is going to be a lot of work, okay? Here's a thing also, I'm going to show you many different ways to do hypothesis testing, as this one's kind of the trickiest one, definitely of the two. Remember, this is hypothesis test for means as opposed to proportions. So means a little bit tricky. And I'm going to show you kind of like what the different methods are for the following, okay, for this, okay? So remember when you're doing hypothesis testing, okay, and you want to just write this down. Remember, there's 4 steps, right? You want to do what's called, right, you want to find your null and alternate, right? You want to make your claims. The second step, right, is you want to find your information, okay? Then you're going to find your p-value, right? And then after that, then you're going to make a conclusion, okay? For the following here. Okay, so it says a random sample of independent, healthy people showed the following body temperatures. Test a hypothesis that the population mean is not 98.6. Use a 0.05 level of significance, okay? So you're going to do your claim, right? Now this time we're not going to be using p because we're not talking about proportions. We're talking about mean. So we're going to use mu instead. Okay? Now, like in hypothesis testing, actually sorry, I did mess up. So remember we did H null, right? And HA, right? So this should be pretty familiar to you guys in chapter 8. Okay? So likewise, you'll do equals for your null, and then your alternate number is either less than, greater than, or not equal to. Okay, but instead of doing p, I'm going to use mu because I'm talking about mean. So I'm going to say mu, and then so what do we look at for our alternate? Remember, we look at the very last sentence that gives away. Notice it's not. So my alternate is not equal to 98.6. So that means my mu has to be equal to 98.6. Remember, your null and your alternate must be the same number, okay, for the following here. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2 here. We're going to do the following. We're going to collect all of our other information. Now, here's the difficult problem, okay, and be really mindful, right? So notice they do not tell you your mean, your standard deviation, or things. They just give you a bunch of random numbers. So that means you need to type them and enter them all in. Okay, so then once we're done, remember we go to stat, calc, and then one variable stats. Okay, so notice they give me x bar 98.12. My s, remember we're not using sigma, we're using s because it's a sample, right? I'm sampling 10 people here. So I'm using s, which is 0.919. So s is 0.919. And then x bar is equal to 98.2 for the following here. Okay. I also want to figure out what my sample size is 10, and then my degrees of freedom is going to be 9. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to first find my standard error, which is s over square root of n. Or in this case, 0.919 divided by square root of 10. Okay, so I get 0.2906. Yeah, let's go 4 places out. Okay. And then let's also talk about what we have. Yeah, so we'll have this here. And then I also want to find my t, right? So my t is the following. Okay, so what we're going to do, actually, why don't we do this? We're going to do number 3, and we're going to calculate our p-value, okay? Now, this is where it kind of gets a little crazy here. So when you get to step 3, what you want to do is, I'm going to show you 3 ways on how to do this, okay? You can do it by hand, or you can use different forms of your calculator, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do all the different versions, okay? So if I'm gonna do it by hand, okay? So this is where it gets a little odd, okay? And I know this doesn't really make sense, okay? But when you're doing things by hand, I'm going to kind of write this up for your t table, okay? So if your alternate is going to be less than, you're going to use table. If your alternate is greater than, you will also use table. And then if it's not equal to, you'll do 2 times whatever your table is, okay? This is a little bit different than the proportions, okay? Yeah, and you just have to kind of like memorize this. There's not an easier way. Okay, if you don't like this way, don't worry. I'll show you a second way of doing this as well. Okay, so let's talk about how you do it by hand, right? So you're going to do a t-score, and you're going to do t is equal to x bar minus mu over your standard error. Okay, so that's going to be 98.12 minus 98.6 divided by 0.2906. So just like z-score, we're doing what's called a t-score. We're also going to calculate this in our calculator. So very similar. I'm going to subtract, and I'll divide. Okay, now my t-score will be negative. Just turn it to be positive. So this is what you're going to do. So you'll say t is equal to negative 1.65. We'll turn it positive. Okay, now if they ask you what your t-score is, just leave it negative. But we're gonna turn it positive so that I can read my table. Okay, so let's go to the following here. So let's talk about what we're gonna do for the following. Okay, so I have a degrees of freedom, right, of 9, and I have a t-score of 1.65. Okay, let me do a different color. So I have a t-score of 1.65 and a degrees of freedom of 9. Okay. Now, if you notice, I don't have a 1.65 here, right? It is not visible for the following. So let me do this here. Sorry, let me zoom in. So degrees of freedom. Okay. So 1.65, I don't see it. Now the thing is, though, if I'm looking from left to right, I notice that it's getting larger. So where is 1.65? 1.65 is right here. Okay. So notice it's between 0.10 and 0.05. Okay. So the idea is, now this is going to be kind of odd, but the idea is, according to my table, right? My table says that it's between 0.10 and 0.05. Okay. Now, since my alternate is not equal to, that means I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So that means my p-value, right, remember if we look up here, right? So remember, if it's less than its table, greater than its table, and then not equal to, my p-value will be 2 times the table. So my p-value will be 2 times 0.10, 0.05. So p times 2. So my p-value is between 20% to 10%. Okay? So what does that mean? We're saying the likelihood of this happening is between 10 to 20%. Okay? Okay? Now, that is one way to calculate your p-value. Okay? Now, there is another way to do this. Okay? So, let me show you a second way. So if you don't like this way, I'm going to show you how to do it using your calculator. So you're going to do the following. You're going to do a second vars. And you're going to go to what's called TCDF. Okay? Yeah, so second vars, and you're going to go to TCDF. Okay? And then you'll go from lower to upper, and then degrees of freedom here. Okay? So let's talk about what that means, right? So remember, this is still a normal distributive curve, right? So the idea is, well, what goes in the center? It is going to be 98.6, right? Because that's in the center here. Okay? And then 98.12 then is like right here. So we're actually going like this. That's what we're doing here. Okay? So my lower is going to be negative 1 E99. My upper is 98.12. My degrees of freedom will be 9. Hold on, that is not right. Okay, sorry, my apologies. Let me redo this here. So, yeah, sorry, disregard what I just said earlier. So when you're doing a curve, okay, for the following, your t-score is actually where your curve is at. So the idea is this is your center, and then it goes all the way up to negative 1.65. And it'll be shaded both ways. So how do I write this on my calculator? So I'm going to go to second vars TCDF, negative 1E99, and I go to negative 1.65, and degrees of freedom. Hit paste. Okay? So this is what it should look like here. And then because it's not equal to, I'm going to multiply it by 2 because I want to calculate both sides of the curve. Sorry, both shaded sides. And I get the following here. Okay, so let me write this down. So this is what you'll write in your calculator. You'll write TCDF negative 1 E99 negative 1.65 comma 9, right? Because that's your degrees of freedom, and then you can multiply it by 2, and you'll get equal to, according to my calculator, 0.133. Okay? Now, that should make sense because 0.133 is between 0.10 and 0.20 here. Okay? I will also show you another method. So you can go to stat test, and you'll do t-test. Yes, t-test, okay? So you can do, and then you'll go to stat, and then you can do the following here. You can do, so my mu is 98.6. My sigma, my x bar is 98.12, and I type all this in. Okay. and then not equals to, and then you calculate, also you get 0.133, okay? So what you can do is once you get to here, once you go to t-test, you'll enter everything you see on the screen, okay? So you'll do the following here. So you'll write what you'll see on your calculator screen. So you can write it like this. So you'll say mu is 98.6, x bar is 98.12, sx is 0.9186, n is equal to 10, and then mu, you say that you're choosing mu is not equal to, and you hit calculate, and then you get 0.132, okay? So, my apologies, but I know there is a lot that I just went over. So if you look at part 3, you can use any of those right here. So you say that, so you can say you can do it by hand, you can do the TCDF, or you can use what's called the t-test. And you, okay, now the TCDF and the t-test write kind of what you're entering in, so I can kind of see kind of your work from that. Okay, but all three of them lead to 0.133, or if you're doing it by hands, between 10 to 20%. Okay. So what do we do here? Okay, now, okay, sorry, and one last thing. You pick one of those 3 methods, okay, for part 3. You do not do all 3. I don't want you to do that. You're going to waste a lot of time. So you can do it by hand, or you could do TCDF, or you can do t-test. I don't care which one you use, okay? So what do? If we look at number 4, we notice our p-value is definitely greater than 0.05. So we say the following. We say we do not reject null. And then we say there is enough evidence or sorry, there is not enough evidence, my bad, that the population mean is not 98.6 degrees. Okay, so here's the thing. If you notice the format of hypothesis test or chapter 9, it's actually virtually the same as chapter 8. The only difference is how you calculate things, right? So because we're using different letters. But the format's the same, right? You determine what your null and your alternate is, right? You find your information, you're going to calculate your p-value, and then based on whether your p-value is greater than or less than 0.05, right, you'll make your conclusion. Okay. Okay, let's look at one last one. And if you have questions, feel free to ask me. These can get a little crazy, as you can see. Okay. So let's look at this one. So number 3, they're being nice to us because they don't give us a bunch of numbers. So they kind of list everything out. So notice it says, determine whether the mean weight for 20-year-old vegetarian women is significantly less than 128 using a level significance of 0.05. So less than 128, that gives that away. That is your alternate. So you do the following. You say mu is less than 128, and mu is equal to 128. Okay. We're going to start listing everything out. Sample mean of 122, that is x bar. Mu is 128. S is 15. N is equal to 40 because I have a random sample, so that means my degree of freedom, I'm subtracting 1, is 39. I'm going to do my SE, which is S over square root of N, or 15 divided by square root of 40. and I get approximately 2.37 for the following. Let's do one more digit, 2.372. Okay, so let's go to the third step for the following. Okay, so again, we're going to do all three ways. Again, focus on the one that you're more comfortable with. So I'm going to do the first one by hand. So I'll do t equals x minus mu over SE, okay? So looks like the following is going to be 122 minus 128 all over 2.372. Okay, so that's what I get if I calculated. Sorry, I'm also doing a calculator that's not on the laptop, so you just need to just put that in to confirm it with yourself. Okay, so let's talk about how you would go about this. Okay, so your t will make it positive, okay, because I want to see where it lies exactly within my table. So I'm going to go to my table, and I have a degrees of freedom of 39. Now, here's the thing, right? Degrees of freedom of 39, we're going to focus more on the 41. And 2.53 is approximately right here. Okay, so it's between these two, right? 2.423 and 2.704. So I'm going to look up, and it's between 0.01 and 0.005. So that means my table is between 0.01 and 0.005. Now, since my alternate is, we said it was less than, that means my p-value will just be exactly the same. Okay, so you can do it this way, or second vars, you can do the TCDF. So sorry, I did apologize. I messed up before. So let's understand what's happening here. So your curve looks like this. Negative 2.53 is here, and it's less than, it's going to go this way. Okay? So you're going to do, so if you look at your picture, you're going from negative 1 E99. You're going to go to negative 2.53, because that's your t-score. Your degrees of freedom is going to be 39. And then you'll hit enter. And so your p-value is equal to 0.0077, right? Is that what it says? 0.0078. Now, if you look at what we did by hand, that makes sense, right? Because it should be less than, it should be between 0.005 and 0.01. So that holds true, okay? So you'll write TCDF, negative 1 E99 to negative 2.53, comma, 39, okay? So that's what you'll write. Remember, you're not multiplying by 2 because based off of your alternate, okay? And then what we're going to do next is the following, or the last option, you'll do t-test. So you're going to go to stat, test, t-test, and you'll type this in. So you're going to type in everything that we have, right? So you'll do 128, 122, 15, 40, and then we're going to select less than, because that's what we said for our alternate, and then we'll calculate. And notice you do, so if you do t-test, and you write everything else down, okay, notice you'll also get p is equal to 0.0078, okay? And then you can write the whole screen. I'm not going to write the whole screen down, but make sure you do that, okay? So what do we notice? My p-value is less than 0.05. So that means we reject null. And then we say there is enough evidence mean weight for a 20-year-old vegetarian. So remember, all I'm doing is I'm writing that last sentence out. Okay. And I'm just saying there is evidence for it. So remember, when you reject, there's evidence for your alternate. If you don't reject, there's not enough evidence for your alternate. Okay. If you have questions, let me know. These are definitely difficult, so please practice them. And then for part 3, I don't care which method you use, okay, as long as you're sufficient in either one of them. Okay, so we're going to end here. But yeah, good luck. Make sure you study for your test. You want to make sure you start practicing everything from chapter 6 to chapter 9. Okay, but other than that, I'll see you guys later.